What's going on, guys? Sensei Ichi here. If you're just tuning in today, welcome to the channel. In the last episode, myself and a man named Dan, he hosts a channel called The Art of One Dojo. If you haven't had a chance yet, look in the description below and you can see a link that'll lead you to Dan's channel. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing Kenpo strikes in relationship to American Tang Soo Do strikes. So without further ado, let's get started. Here we go.
Thank you, Sensei. I also have with me today White Belt Zach. He's going to be helping me out demonstrate some of the punches and strikes in American Kenpo. And he's usually behind the camera, but we're going to pull him out and do some work on him today. So let's get right to it. So let's talk about the strikes that you see common in the American Kenpo system. Now, I want to start off by saying that what American Kenpo does is we teach a whole variety of strikes and kicks. I mean, pretty much what you see in all the arts combined, we at least introduce them, although we keep a very core set that are kind of ones that we use on a regular basis. So we will see and teach all varieties of strikes, but we're just going to focus on our main ones today. Defining a punch versus a strike. In Kenpo, that's how we define them, strikes and punches. So let's just start off with our basic one, the straight punch or reverse punch. So from our starting position, hands on their side, we rotate. As we thrust the hand out, we rotate the hand and land in kind of a snapping position, hand out in front of us. And what we're doing is, one, we're aiming with those first two knuckles. And we're also keeping our wrist in alignment with our arm because you want that support. If you don't have that support in your wrist, you're very, very likely to injure yourself. So you want that wrist aligned with the arm, and also you want a slight bend to the elbow. We don't want to lock that out because if you actually hit something solid and your elbow's locked out, that's a lot of shock and can cause injury to your elbow. So we keep it slightly bent as a shock absorber. From here, we have the vertical punch. So the vertical punch is basically our reverse punch, but we would just turn the hand vertical. And the reason we have this is I personally find this is stronger. I love this punch. It's one of my go-to punches. And also it's a little bit more flexible, whereas if I was striking at a target above my shoulders with a reverse punch, I'd have to lift it up a little bit higher. But the problem with doing that is for me to lift up, instead of with my first two knuckles, I have to do a slight adjustment. And you can see immediately what the problem is right there is I'm losing that support in my wrist. So I either have a choice of clipping with my first two knuckles here or injuring my wrist. The vertical punch solves that. By returning the hand vertically, you're actually striking. You can still strike with the first two knuckles, but you have that support. So your wrist is totally protected in that position. So we have our straight punches and we have our vertical punches. And the vertical punch can be from all different levels. I especially like it for close-up body shots. Good torque and power body shots. And speaking of body shots, we have our inverted punch. Now this is a very close range weapon in Kenpo. It's similar to an uppercut, but we don't really have that boxer's uppercut that you see in a lot of systems. It's more of an inverted body shot. So it's kind of like a vertical punch or a reverse punch that doesn't quite finish its rotation. Good upward body shots, like solar plex under the rib cage, good solid strike. From there we have our hook punch. Now we don't see this as commonly as the other punches, but we do have it in a few various techniques. So if I was in my fighting stance, this hand kind of turns and strikes again with the first two knuckles, but I'm not doing this big winding motion. It's more of kind of a subtle snap. I'm kind of clipping on the way back a little bit. So it's a good starting jab. It can have some power. You get some rotation behind it, you can get some serious power, but it's also good for setup shots as well. And finally, we have our back fist. The back fist is pretty signature to Kenpo. We use this all the time, and we use it from various positions. We have it from here, where you kind of use it as a jab. You kind of roll the hand and snap. It's really good for getting around a guard. We also do a lot of body shots with this. The reason I like it with the body shots is when you add a lot of rotation and you rotate into it, there is a lot of energy that can be transferred into that back fist. So good for ribs, abdomens, bringing the person's height down. You will see the back fist in a lot of Kenpo techniques.
Okay, so we have 4 Kenpo punches. We teach our beginner white belts 3 punches. 2 of them are standing and 1 of them is stepping. All of our punches go straight or they go down, but they're never going to be up and down. They're going to be more horizontal than vertical. So that's definitely a very big difference. We do have hook punches. We do have uppercuts that we have in our forms, and we do teach them in our studio. We do not teach those punches to beginners because usually when we teach in our school, we teach the technique that is in relationship to the forms that they're learning. So that way they learn the basic technique according to their level and according to their forms. So I think the only different punch that we have is this vertical punch that Dan discussed, which is pretty cool. It's a little different. I've seen different styles do that punch. It just not for us. I think we're just gonna stick with the horizontal punch. So Kenpo, you can keep that vertical punch. It's all yours. Merry Christmas, or Happy Hanukkah, or Kwanzaa. or Boxing Day. So we have an uppercut that goes out to a diagonal angle. We also have them that come straight up, one to go underneath the chin and one to go directly at the chin. We have two different ones in different forms. We also have a reinforced uppercut that we do in our forms. We do not stress uppercuts to the body in any of our forms. We don't really teach them as much as part of our basic curriculum, but we do incorporate them into more of our advanced, like red belt and black belt, higher level curriculum. Now when it comes to the back knuckle, we have it in sparring as well as in our forms. I think the only thing that's different between what you and I do, Dan, is the way in which we execute it. We have a snapping one as well as a thrusting one. So when you're doing it more like this, I think that's a different style of which we do it. We do it in sparring kind of like that. So instead of our jab, we have that back knuckle throw out to the side of the head. So we have back knuckles throughout many of our intermediate forms. We have double back knuckles that we do. We have a back knuckle that meets with a bottom fist or an open-handed low defense. So we use back knuckles quite frequently. We call it a back knuckle, you call it a back fist. Same thing. We're using the back of our knuckles to strike, same kind of principle. So it looks like it's pretty much the same thing. Let's check out what's next. Here we go.
Now, strikes that are not punches, we have our hammer fist, using the meaty part of the hand. We showed in the previous video what our inward blocks and outward blocks are. They're basically hammer fist strikes. It's a good hammering solid action, so if you imagine if you were holding like an ice pick or a knife, you were stabbing whatever you were striking. So we have hammer fists that go across the face line. We do hammer fists to the body. We do hammer fists to the groin. Another signature Kenpo technique is through that dropping hammer fist to the groin. You'll see it used a lot. A rotational striking hammer fist to the groin.
Okay, the hammer fist. Yes, we do the hammer fist. A hammer fist is actually something that we do from white belt all the way up to black belt. We have our beginner students every time they come in and take a first class or on their birthday, they get to break a board with a hammer fist. It's our signature power move to break boards, and it's a very powerful strike we do in self-defense as well. We have a bottom fist and a hammer fist, which is basically the same thing. The hammer just goes down and the bottom fist goes to the side. We use hammer fists in forms. We also use our bottom fist in many forms, all the way from beginner to intermediate, all the way up to black belt forms in advance. Let's check out what's next.
We have chops. We don't have these as much as our punches, but you'll see chops that go along the neckline, inside the neck, outside the neck. We also do a lot off of, say we kind of rebound or we deflect a strike, we might ride up that arm line, kind of guide into a throat strike. So really we use them for the neck areas. Not really, you're not going to see them in body shots so much in Kenpo. They're really good for throat shots, neck shots, things along those lines.
Hey Dan.
What's a pig's favorite karate move?
What?
A pork chop!
Get it? Okay, seriously though. So we have chops as well. We have a lot of chops actually. In the last video I showed reinforced center chop and reinforced low chop. Those two chops double as blocks as well as strikes. So we use the reinforced center chop that goes to the neck like Dan said. We also use chops to go to the ribs. We use chops to go to the temple. We use chops to go to the groin. We use chops pretty much everywhere. Sometimes we even go chopping for new chops. So I think that we have a few more chops in our system that they have in theirs. It looks like he only had about one or two. I think we have a plethora of different chops. So we have regular chop single-handed, inverted chop, reinforced center, reinforced low, and double chops. Okay, let's check out what's next.
Then we have our elbow strikes. So we have our inward elbow, which hand just comes up. We keep the hand touching our body. We don't bring it out here and bring it back. That's more of a weird hook punch. You just kind of do a foot motion. It doesn't look like much from this position, but if you're in a fighting stance, that's all the rotation you really need, especially if you put your body weight behind it. Very, very damaging strike, especially to the ribs. We have our outward elbow. So if we're at our center line, if our hand is above our center line, we start with palm up and we rotate it downward to get that torque. Reverse, if we're starting from this position, we start hand down and rotate upward. So these are also good for rebounding rib shots. We have the upward elbow, and we have our downward elbow, and you won't see them as much, but they're in there. The downward elbow especially is useful if you apply gravity to it. Very, very, very powerful strike. You'll often see it applied to the spinal or the base of the neck. Very dangerous strike to use.
Okay, the elbows. We do use elbows. We have forward elbows, we have upward elbows, downward elbows, backwards elbows. We have a lot of elbows. We use them a lot in our self-defense. We actually even use elbows to block as well in a couple of our forms. I think elbows are pretty universal. We also reinforce them, so we use them with two hands. We also have actually elbow smashes. They're one of our, what we call power strikes. So we have a couple strikes that we set aside that are just power strikes. We focus them in self-defense to mainly discuss these are the ones you want to throw in defense against somebody who's trying to really harm you. So, because elbow strikes are really, really powerful strikes. Okay, let's see what we got next.
And finally, we have our forearm strike. So if you imagine clotheslining somebody, we don't do it to the head so much as we do it to the body. So this is good for like you come in with a block and you slide in or you shuffle forward with a forearm to the body. or my personal favorite, to the throat. And from the throat, we go back to that hammer fist I told you about. From this position, we have a lot of, from here, if the person bends over and their head's right about in this position, good pop-up strike. Right up underneath the chin, catch him in the throat, stands him up, opens up more targets. It's a beautiful strike. It's one of my favorites.
We don't do that. We don't do anything like that. We use a forearm to block, but we don't use it to strike. So you got me there, Dan. I'm thinking about this forearm strike, and it sounds pretty interesting. We actually have a strike that we use called a ridge hand, and when we close our hand, we're hitting with this part of this little muscle on the hand right there. So it's relatively similar. One more point for Kenpo where they do something totally different that we don't even get close to doing. I think that's a very big difference right there. So that's kind of interesting. All right, let's see what we got next.
Now we also have what's called inserts. And inserts are basically smaller strikes that we add wherever they fit. So they might be an eye gouge, might be a palm heel strike, middle knuckle. Middle knuckle is good for under the armpit strikes, half fist, which fit to the throat. So we kind of put those in wherever. So they're literally inserted.
The inserts that he's talking about, the palm strike, the spear hand, the ridge hand, the ox jaw, the web hand, those are our main Tang Soo Do strikes. These are intermediate strikes that we teach to all of our intermediate students that Dan's talking about as their secondary techniques that they're doing. He says they're little inserts, they do them briefly. Those are our main deadly power strikes. We do them to the nose, we do them to the jaw, the temple, the throat, so the eyes for the spear hand. So they're all really detonating strikes. So those are kind of our bread and butter. So I think that's where we differ, is that they're more, from what I see, and I don't know everything there is to know about Kenpo here, but just from what I see and what Dan has shared with us, that they're talking about punches, elbows, and chops and their hammers as their primary strikes, and our primary strikes are the Tang Soo Do techniques. So I think that's where it looks like we differ, is that we focus more on our specific Tang Soo Do techniques, and then they're focusing in on those generic Kenpo techniques.
And on the fun note, you often hear Kenpo critics talk about Kenpo practitioners as being slap happy. Why is that? Well, because we have a principle called rebounding, and you see it mainly in the back fist. Rebounding is, so say we did a hammer fist across the face, well, I want to use this and do a hammer fist against the body, but I don't want to just necessarily just reload and strike, because this takes effort and energy loss to stop it and swing it again. So we'll rebound off our own body to kind of bounce it, saves a little bit of time, and actually it keeps your momentum going, so it's quick rebound and strike. So you hear a lot of, Kenpo guys beat themselves up. This is what they're seeing. We do rebounding, and you do rebounding with the inserts like an eye gouge, then it looks like we're slap happy. So that's just kind of a fun little side note. Those are our basic punches and strikes in the American Kenpo system.
Slap happy. I love that. That's hysterical. I've never heard of that before. I have seen different artists do like slappy stuff, but I've only seen it in that movie Three Ninjas, where those two ninja guys slap each other and they do that bit. You know what I'm talking about, when they're in the ship? I have noticed that in Gojo-ru, there's a lot of real quick like body hits like that they do. I've never really understood the reasoning for that, other than to kind of show a little bit of flair. We don't really have anything that's even close to that. Now you're Slappy Dan. So thank you, Slappy Dan. Alright guys, that about wraps it up. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't yet guys, please check out Dan's channel, The Art of One Dojo. He does a lot of really great information, a lot of great historical videos talking about the history of this art and that art. I find very fascinating. I'm sure most of you do. In the last video, the comment section was amazing. There was so much great feedback. I would love to hear more of your feedback about the Kenpo strikes in relationship to the Tang Soo Do strikes. If you guys like what you saw, please hit that subscribe button below and hit the bell notification. That way, every time that I put a video out, you will be notified. I put out a video every Monday and Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here in California. And until next time, guys, Tang Soo.